Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
So welcome to the RTÉ GAA podcast. Rory O'Neill is my name, sitting in for Jackie for what I hope will be the last time. But looking forward to another brilliant weekend's hurling. We've got on Ryan from Online and Jackie Tyrrell from former Kilkenny. Obviously, All-Ireland winning captain. Actually, Jackie, you'll get a laugh out of this. I was doing an old Kahoot quiz there the other day, and part of the questions that popped up were a round of All-Ireland winning captains and who pops up. And it brought back lots of painful memories all over again, Jackie.
Yeah, that famous day in 06 was actually only funny the weekend. I was on obviously the live with Dunloe down in Cork, and what game we were watching? We were actually watching the game in Nolan Park, Kenny and Galway, and they zoomed in. I think someone was taking a sideline at one stage. Dunloe goes, "That grass is very long there, isn't it?" I said, "Don't you start again."
It's the long grass.
He's all allowed to say it. He forgot who he was talking about.
But that's the thing. Like, you were waiting in the long grass figuratively and literally. So, no, look, I'm going to start today, lads, just slightly tangential, and just going to throw something out there. Look, I mean, it's an interesting discussion point because it was something that was picked up on in the aftermath of the Watford-Limerick game, particularly. John Kiley made reference in one of his post-match interviews, which I didn't really see too many people pick up on, but I think sometimes you can pick up on little things that managers say, and they can hint at maybe, different aspects that might have been displayed, displeasing to them to a certain extent. But he did mention about ball and play after the Watford-Limerick game and how low it was and how stop-start the entire game was and how difficult it was to kind of, as we say in hurling, let the game flow. So as a means of, just because I was curious, so I went back and had a look at it. Now, there are, in stoppages terms, puckouts, line balls, reds and yellows, frees, penalties, 65s, Hawkeye, bash balls, injuries and subs. Now, in that game, there were 57 puckouts, 15 line balls, 12 reds and yellows, 26 frees, 4 Hawkeyes, 1 bash ball, 2 injury delays, and 6 substitutions. Maybe 7, actually. I might have missed one. So that's 123 stoppages across a 70-minute game. So the ball in the first half was only in play for 14 minutes and 48 seconds. Think about that, right? The second half, which was 7 minutes longer, was even worse. It was only 14 minutes and 54 seconds. Like, people nearly had right to ask for a partial refund. So this is the theory. And I'm just going to throw it out there, Jackie, and see what you think. But I do think it's more prevalent than ever. And I actually think it's 4 points for a goal. I know you're going to say, what's that going to have? What kind of effect is that going to have on ball and play time? But I think the first thing anyway, really, is that it's the simplest of rule changes to implement. It doesn't require any fundamental shift in how the game is refereed. I know you were on the show on the Saturday game talking about 2 consecutive hand passes and puckouts going past the 45, but this is just an extra point for a goal, so it's tidy. Now, if you look at the way hurling is played now, right, and I do think people do need to be slightly more introspective about assessing the aesthetics of the game. It's puck out, bish, bash, bosh, ball breaks, shot, repeat. Now, the spectacle of the game has become patchy, right? Now, will it fix that? No, but it might help. And what's the worst that could happen if it was tried in the league? I mean, we look for meaning in the league. Imagine the excitement around it next year. If this was in on a trial basis, 4 points for a goal. And if football wants to continue with 3 points, let them off. But the first thing you would hope is that it would encourage teams to reduce the pot shots from distance. It won't eradicate that either, right? But it might reduce them. It'll mean teams will be encouraged to keep more players out of that middle third and maybe more slightly further forward, because that middle third is a big problem in a lot of games. Huge numbers traffics-wise, huge numbers of contact, and then hence more fouls and more frees. This might help stretch the play out a bit. Plus, there's a basic problem with the value of a goal in that it can be wiped out so quickly. I mean, Tip Clare 2 weeks ago, right? Clare scored a goal. Tip scored 2 points. They had 2 points on the board within a minute, and it was effectively a burst balloon. And if you look at other sports, wasn't a try only worth 4 points in rugby once upon a time? I don't know. What's the worst that could happen, Jack?
When you frame it like that, Rory, you would think, why shouldn't we do this? And I suppose you have to think, what are the drawbacks? And initially, I can't come up with any. And when you think, right, 4 points for a goal, how is that going to stop the ball? How is that going to encourage more ball and play time? And I think the way you've graphed it out, there's indirect consequences that will have the ball and play more. And I think that it'll also help with what I was on about in the Sunday game, where the continuous use of the hand pass, and because possession is so key now, people are afraid to give it away. But I think there might be a bit more flahulock with the ball if there's an incentive of a 4-pointer instead of, because what you see is half back around the middle of the field, they get the ball, they go across, they go lateral, they look up, there's not a whole lot on. But sometimes, and even notice the weekend with Galway, they went very direct. I definitely think it's worth something very looking at, definitely looking strongly at. And as you said, the league is kind of a dead duck nearly at these stage. Trial it. What's the worst it'll be? It'll be a talking point among us. If it works, it's great. If it falls flat in his face, we can just move on from it. It's definitely something to be looked at. And like it kind of goes in par with the give 2 points for a sideline, that whole conversation as well. I definitely think if you look across the games, you look at Kilkenny were utterly dominant against Westmeath, didn't score a goal, didn't really threaten it.
Didn't care, maybe. Didn't need it.
Yeah, maybe. Cork didn't score a goal the weekend, am I right in saying that?
No goal.
Didn't really threaten, had a few, half chances. And once again, we see how dominant they were. So teams have become so obsessed with points and keeping the ticket. And look, you look at Limerick going back a couple of years. They were happy if people drop bodies back, we'll keep over 30 points. We'll win the game, lads. We'll win it from 60 yards plus. So I'd be all in favour of innovative ideas. And I definitely agree. This is one, Rory.
What do you think, Owen?
Yeah, I think it's worth trialing. I think we've seen the average of goals scored kind of declining over the last 10 or 20 years, and
points going the opposite direction.
Points going the opposite way. I was just looking back there. I think it was Galway did it first. So Galway in 2017 won the All Ireland, and I think they scored 2 goals, and they were both in the same game. So, and Limerick have done it to a slightly less extent, won multiple All-Irelands, not really needing goals. And it is probably the most exciting part of the game. So I think it is worth trialing something to maybe encourage that more. I'd also, at the same time, trial, instead of a 65, you get a sideline, maybe a sideline from the 20 even, to encourage people to shoot. I think that could be worth doing as well. I'd also like to know, Rory, exactly how long it took you to work out how long the ball was in play. Did you have a stopwatch? Did you have a stopwatch on yourself?
Yes, I did. That was the tedious part. But look, sure, we did it for the cause.
Staggering stats, Rory. Staggering stats. The ball's only play 14 minutes either half.
Either half. It is shocking. Like, and I mean, I don't necessarily think it's got anything to do with the slitter, by the way. And I know people do make a reference to that. The slitter, when I asked Pat Daly about this a couple of years ago, when I first started looking at it, and Pat said the slitter hasn't changed in weight. What has changed is technique. The hurleys have changed, that he accepts that. And the boss that on some of the hurleys that the lads are using are definitely illegal. Well, take a look at Patrick Horgan's, They're
all illegal.
Yeah. So, but also what's changed in a massive way is the strength and the power and the precision with which lads can actually strike the ball now. They can just strike from so much further out and bigger distances. And I don't know. I mean, look, if you're looking to try and encourage contests, I think if you tried it in the National League, at least you'd maybe generate some data and you could make a definitive decision. It's not this massive culture shift. Okay, a 4-pointer becomes a 3-pointer. Or we lost the league game as a result of it being 4 points, but now it's only 3 points. Well, who cares about losing league games?
Rory, a question for you, and you've obviously done a deep dive on it and a root and branch kind of review. Can you see any potential drawbacks from it, or any issues or frustrations that may lead?
Well, there is, I suppose, the potential that if you put a bigger premium on a goal, you may encourage teams to become slightly more defensive and say, well, we're definitely not going to concede goals today, lads. But to do that, you've got to sit back, Jackie. And in hurling, you'll just get picked off. This is the beauty of hurling that football doesn't have in a luxury. Because football can put 15 lads in behind the ball. You still have to work your way through that. You don't need to do that in hurling. So if you sit back and say, right, we're not going to concede goals, grand job. You know, we'll pick you off, get the snipers out, boom, boom, game over.
Could you see then a situation where teams are drawn back to the Christy Heffernan big man on the edge of the square?
This is it. This is exactly what I'm thinking. You know, I think the bear in the square comes back. Jackie, you could make a comeback.
Yeah, me say I want in and Kevin Hennessy from Cork at the other end.
Would we see then maybe more black cards as well? You know, I thought it was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, Brian Lohan was saying after the Clare Tip game, it was kind of a throwaway comment after he said, we seem to be the only team that gets black cards. You know, you could kind of dismiss that as losing manager. But at the same time, I was trying to think, the last black card, I know it's not a black card in hurling, the last goal scoring opportunity punished in Munster probably was the Aidan McCarthy, Jake Morris thing. Yeah. Now, it almost doesn't happen in Championship.
If you think of Clare and Wexford last year in Tyrrell, when Lee Chin went in around Keane, there's a Keane Nolan, and he pulled him down, he got away with it. So the escape on that way, I suppose, probably to your point, on the high profile one of the Aidan McCarthy one down the Gaelic grounds, where it was nearer to the Ennis Road than it was the actual goal. So he did seem to be, within that time, all right, he seemed to be punished more than others. But the black card is a very interesting one. It kind of goes missing for a couple of months, and next thing they're coming through again, and we're back talking about it. It's like it's like a hidden rule, and it just, I don't know, we kind of forget about next thing. Oh, lads, we better enforce this again, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing about it is that it's so vaguely framed. It's like, if you pull a lad down, it's a penalty, or if you trip him. But if you just hold on to him, it's not.
Yeah, if you tug his jersey, or
or hold or pull the jersey. So all you have to do is foul him in the right way, and you're okay.
Correct.
So look, I don't know. I mean, I just think even the back ends of games. I mean, if you're 4 points up, you're still not safe. Like if you're 4 points up in the current climate, that's a 2-score game minimum, and it's goals are hard to get. Let's be honest. But if you're 4 points up going down the home stretch, you're still not home and host. I think it'll add just a little bit of a frisson to the back ends of matches as well. And it'll give teams hope that, look, you know, keep going to the final whistle. You'll never know. I think it should give it a rattle in the league, develop data, see what kind of patterns emerge. And if people feel, look, it didn't really add anything, and then the law of unintended consequences kicked in, and as a result made the game worse, then sure, look, just abandon it for Championship. It's not necessarily this massive culture shift. All you're doing is putting a numerical value on something that already exists, but just increasing it in value. And in an era of high inflation, why not? You know, everything else is going up in price. But let's move it on, lads.
Well, I'd say the only pushback you'll say, I'd say the fullback unions will get together and say, lads, we ain't having this.
And speaking of the fullback unions, Jackie, dreadful news for Limerick. Really dreadful news.
Rory, it's
desperate.
It's like a death to the family, really.
Yeah.
That news of Sean Finn yesterday. I mean, we Keane Lynch last year, you had Sean Finn. I mean, I feel the best defender in the country, and possibly has been for the last 4 or 5 years. I know Mikey Butler got the All-Star last year, but it was tit for tat between the two of them. But what a blow this guy is. And there just seems to be, unfortunately, a bit of a curse with that Limerick full back line. If you think of the guys that have gone down with Mike Casey with an ACL and Richie English. But this guy just goes about his business so quietly, probably doesn't get the pearly lights of, you know, the Garrod Hagertys and Keane Lynch, but this lad is so important. Sean Finn, an outstanding defender, has all the raw materials. And I think I commented here before, I think the toughest time he's ever got was off Alan Cadigan below. They played in Gaelic grounds, they played a month around. I think only gotten 2 points off him before. He's just there'll be a lot of corner forwards relieved in this morning that he's not around for here, because he's without doubt the best defender. Massive loss to the game, and obviously to Limerick and to John Kiley's plans.
You did a great piece with him. Was that for the All-Stars? I've just off the top of my head, Jackie. Was it for the All-Stars or was it for the RT Sport Awards? I can't remember which.
It was the All-Stars, and there was one question.
It was a great piece. Like I thought, I found that fascinating. Now, it was a fantastic piece, and it was just he's got a brilliant personality, and like I suppose that's the one thing that you kind of say. From his point of view, I'd say he'd be full of positivity, and you just hope that he'll recover and get back. Really, wouldn't you?
Oh, of course you would, and a lovely lad, as you say, real bubbly and that. And I always remember when they played Waterford, and I'd never seen him kind of been done and Desi Hutchinson got a ball, flicked it over his head and hit it over the bar, and I said, "Oh, we learned something about Sean Finn here." Anyway, Sean Finn just came back outstanding, but I was mad to ask him about, and I asked him about it, and he was just like, "No, I just reset. It was the next ball. I was going to win the next ball." And I think that attitude just sums him up really. He's very, very level-headed. He's grounded. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. Although that didn't look good from that day, he just rebounded so quickly and so well. And I expect him, I won't say to come back stronger, because I don't know if he can physically come back any stronger or from a performance point of view. But I expect to come back and be back in that number 2 jersey for Limerick next year, and as good as ever before.
It gives John Kiley a selection conundrum, but does it then at the same time on with they had a kind of a 4-into-3 scenario in their full back line to begin with: Barry Nash, Dan Marcy, and who's in the other corner?
Barry Nash, Dan
Marcy, and
Mike Casey,
Richie English. Yeah. So I suppose they have the depth really to cope, wouldn't they, Owen?
You would think so, yeah. I mean, as you said, they kind of already had some very good players that were being left out, so they have that to step in. I mean, no matter how good whoever comes in is, as Jackie said, Sean Finn has probably been the best defender in the country over the last 5 years. But we saw against Limerick last year, without Keane Lynch, without Peter Casey, without Mike Casey for a couple of years before, they're able to cope with losing the big players and still win. So they'll probably be okay. Yeah,
I'm sure they will. And there won't be too many worrying about them just yet, I'd imagine. But getting on to this weekend, and speaking of worry, the worry has kicked in, Jackie. Cork Tip, massive crowd. A good friend of mine, and this will probably annoy but I'm going to say it anyway. A good friend of mine described it as the Liverpool versus Manchester United of hurling, in that no matter where the two teams are, or no matter what stage of their season they're in, it's still the biggest game in hurling in terms of the tradition, the history behind it, and regardless of where the two teams might be in the national conversation. And funnily enough, this year, maybe both, well, certainly Tipperary are, and it promises to be close enough to full. And Saturday night down in Cork, hopefully an epic. What do you think, Jack?
It's as good as it gets, Rory. No, I agree with you. You couldn't contend. When you say the words Cork and Tip, you think of all the great games that have gone down through the years. You think of the colour. You think of the characters from both sides within it. I would like to think, I feel that Tipperary are a little more progressed than Cork. Cork, due to no fault of their own, are still a little unknown because they got such a facile test last week. They passed that with flying colours. They ticked a lot of boxes. They had some debutants. Decky Dalton out a half forward. Patrick Horgan seems to have a bit of zip back in him. Brian Roach is a huge plus for him. And I made this point the weekend. He's a very un-Cork-like player. He's a very gritty kind of hard-working, kind of very simplistic hurler, which I think Cork probably might have overlooked before. And maybe this is kudos to Pat Ryan. I feel Tipperary are a bit more rugged at the minute. They've had a better league. And had a really good performance against Clare. But that being said, Cork are at home. They're riding the crest of a wave. It's very nicely poised. I even like the fact that it's on a Saturday evening. I just think that add to the occasion, add to the crowd as well. And it's just going to be very mouth-watering with a lot on the line for both teams.
The Cork team was named obviously last night, as was the Tip team. Now, we didn't see any changes in Tipperary, but given the non-availability of Owen Downey the first day out due to suspension, and obviously the performance of Robbie O'Flynn when he came on against Waterford, were you surprised that these guys didn't come into the team, Jackie, for Saturday night?
The Robbie O'Flynn one, I wasn't really, because as a set of 6 forwards, you looked at them, they were pretty good against Waterford. Be very hard to drop any of them. Look, he's probably still trying to find out about Decky Dalton, so he didn't really get a test last week, so you have to stick with him. The older guard, as I say, Conor Lehan, Patrick Horgan, Seamus Harney, they all fronted up really well. I mean, Dar Fitzgibbon was close enough to being man of the match. So the Owen Downey one, although the full back line was excellent, I thought because they invested so much in the league, they might look at bringing him back in. Now, it would be quite harsh on who would you drop. Look, I don't think Niall O'Leary would be dropped because he's the captain. Damien Cahalane was quite strong. So it's a tricky one for them, but I thought they would look at Owen Downey. I really did, because it looked like he had all the attributes to be a full back for Cork. Ciarán Joyce is locked down to 6, and he's going to get a fair test the weekend, whether it be if he was in there on Jason Ford. I see Seamus Callan is back on the bench. So I was a little surprised by that. I understand why Pat Ryan doesn't change his team, but I think if you're looking further down the road, will that full back line get it done in a Munster final? Will it get it done in Croke Park and All-Ireland semi-finals? I'd still have question marks over it, and you still have Sean O'Donoghue to come back.
And you've got the likes of Owen, you've got the likes of Jake Morris and Jason Ford, goal hungry, tip forwards, not exactly a new phenomenon, let's be honest. And then, as Jackie mentioned, Seamie Cal coming off the bench. There's been a remarkable turnaround in Tipperary's fortunes, given the fact that in last year's round robin they didn't win a match, and now all of a sudden, no, there's no gimme, and there's no guarantee they will, or Cork will, or any team will get out of Munster the way things are lining up at the minute. But it's some turnaround by Liam Cahill to take them from a situation where you lost all 4 matches in the round robin to going down to Ennis and winning, and now coming down to Cork, and most people backing them and feeling that they're potentially favourites coming into Saturday night.
You're trying to big them up now, Rory.
But I think they are. I think they must be fair. Surely, if they've beaten Clare and Ennis, and Cork have beaten a very below par Watford, I don't necessarily think that's me playing any sense of.
But Rory, Cork or Cork?
You can be damn sure of that, Jackie.
I'd say with Cork at home, they're probably still slight favourites, or at least even, as you said, Tip's form is more impressive because they beat Clare, who then beat Limerick, and we don't really know, Waterford. Then Waterford gave Limerick a good go, where they just really tired the last day when Cork were fresh. We're going to have 2 fairly fresh teams. You'd expect Tip maybe to be slightly fresher now. It is an interesting turnaround. You'd feel a bit sorry for Bonner in that I think he started the introduction of the young lads that had kind of been needed for a couple of years. He started that last year, and Liam Cahill has kind of accelerated it. It is interesting to see Seamie Callan back on the bench. Bonner wasn't used the last day. Noel McGrath seems to just be ageless. He seems to be as good as he ever was. And then we saw the Cork lads. Patrick Horgan, by the way, at 35 today. So we
happy birthday, Huggy.
A happy birthday to him, yeah. And then Lehan and Harnedy still going. So it's a very interesting mix. I'd like to ask Jackie, what does he think of the kind of new look Tip full back lines? You have Johnny Ryan and you have Mikey Breen. How does he think that's going, a fullback?
I'd still have the jury out on Mikey Breen to a certain extent. And look, the way they defend, they're very flexible within it on. Johnny Ryan has been really, really good, very pacey guy. I suppose having Cathal Barrett just gives him that stability there. You have a man marker there. We see the job he did on Tony Kelly. But I will say, as a group of 6, they do offer themselves some really good protection. Brian O'Mara, it's a new look Tip defence with Brian O'Mara, Ronan Marr. There's a nice mix of a bit of use and also some experience in Ronan Marr and Cathal Barrett. Mikey Breen, look, he's done really well so far. He offers pace and strength. I just would worry about the know-how of defending as a 3. I know he's had some previous underage experience, but I've tried to transition from 4 to 3. I've struggled. Paul Murphy tried it, has struggled. Pádraig Marr even did it for Tipperary and struggled. It's a completely different dynamic going from a 5 or a 7 or even a 4 or a 2 into 3.
Only JJ's about the only one that I know that kind of, but look, I mean, you're talking special in that scenario, Jackie, aren't you?
Yeah, you're talking real elite defenders, and it's very hard to do. Dan Morrissey did it really, really well for Limerick and actually won an All-Star. It's just he probably only had a year there and then moved out because Mike Casey. So you can't forget the job he did. And the difference is at wing back or cornerback, you have a license to attack the ball. You have a license to kind of roam forward. At full back, it's a different mentality. And when you're playing on the wings, the ball is generally coming from one area. So you're kind of defending one side of the field, whereas full back, it's both. So it's a completely different concept. And I wouldn't totally sign off on Michael Breen just yet. I wouldn't be surprised if Ronan Marin's up there if we get to the latter stage of the championship. Look, he's passed all the tests up to date. Maybe I'm being a bit overcritical on him, but I just think teams might look at an opportunity to get at him a bit more. I know Ronan Maher is probably another one that we put into that category because he did an outstanding job in 19 going back there and actually won an All-Star. So, yeah, kind of like that slogan, a lot done, more to do on.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be losing then, though, Ronan Maher's scoring threat distribution from the wing backs?
Well, I will say one thing on Ronan Maher's scoring threat. I think the further away from the opposition goal, the better. Outstanding striker, but for every 10 balls he hits, one of them goes over the bar. And I'd say Liam Cahill has banned him from striking. This guy has a serious slap on a ball, but his accuracy is so poor. And I've actually noticed that he has tapered off a bit. His distribution is excellent. I've no doubt about it. But I still feel from a full back position, his distribution can still influence a game. As regards the scoring threat, I'll remain neutral on that. I don't think he, for all the bang of all bustling and coming out with balls, a lot of those balls taper off wide. And I'd like to see it on stats on his conversion rates, because there's nothing more deflating than a halfback coming out, good position, deliver ball, hits a long ball, and it goes wide. It just kind of kills it a bit. So I'd say Liam Cahill has banned him from shooting.
In a Tipperary context as well, Jackie, one of the big players, and I think it was Donncha Boyle had a fantastic piece in the Irish Independent about Alan Tynan and his journey to becoming a Tipperary hurler, which was, slightly circuitous, and he went down a rugby route, and I think he was excellent at some other sports. He's been a huge plus for Liam Cahill.
Oh, he's been massive. I would love Owen Tynan to be from Kilkenny. Yeah. I think he'd suit that. You could play him half forward midfield, mad for work, hugely physical, hugely pacey, can knock a few pints over the bar. He's a clone of what Liam Cahill. I'd say if Liam Cahill sat down at the start of the year and say, drop my prototype hurler, I want to integrate him. I'd say pick a lad 5'10", built like a shipwreck house, to flick a few pints, and will cover serious ground. And Alan Tynan pops up, and he just fits it so well. So he's a huge plus. Garrod O'Connor is another huge plus. Brian O'Mara, like you're looking at, he's after putting his 6 in, seamless. He's after integrating Alan Tynan. Conor Stakelum didn't start the last year. I like this lad a lot. He's back in the weekend. I'm surprised he didn't start. So it's probably Tipperary are probably with Cork, but I put Tipperary to have integrated the most new talent in, and we were always, where are these new 20s coming? They lost Paddy Cadell, Barry Heffernan has been injured, and Liam Cahill just plucks out these little gems in Brian O'Mara, Alan Tynan, Garrod O'Connor, Conor Stakelum, and off they go, and marry them in, as we say, with the Shamies, the Noel McGraths and the Bonners, and they have a lovely blend of youth and experience.
Jackie, do you think that Liam Cahill has deliberately gone for a bit of beef in the likes of Tynan and O'Connor to compete with Limerick and Clare and the big hits?
You better believe it. Like you have to when you're looking at your player profile, you have to have Limerick in the back of your mind, particularly if you're in Munster going, look, we're going to come up against Limerick. We need meat in around the middle third. We need lads that are going to be able to stand up to these guys. And you've seen Alan Tynan before a ball was thrown in, and there's a bit of diddlement in these lads. So I would say definitely. And Liam Cahill, we know what his principles are. We know he's massive on hard work, physicality, intensity. Alan Tynan ticks all those boxes. Garrod O'Connor is a hugely physical and able to win his own ball. So you can be sure of it. That was part of the DNA when he was trying to unearth new talent in Tipperary.
I'd expect it to be physical, but not necessarily in the way that Clare Limerick was. And Cork Tip games generally, Jackie, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a looseness about them, but they tend to be very skills-based, two teams that, generally speaking, again, are very proficient in the basics, and you're probably going to see a lot of stylish hurling, and that's kind of feeds into the traditions of the fixture. So is that the kind of game that you see Saturday night, and who do you see coming out on top?
That is traditionally, but I think it'll be a lot more physical than we think. I understand your concept on it, Rory, but I just think Liam Cahill brings physicality to most games. You even think of that Waterford team, they were very, very physical. Sometimes they went too hard. You think of the Limerick game where they threw everything at him for 10 or 15 minutes and then died at this. That I don't think he knows any difference. Only bring a massive. I think that's the starting point for this Tipperary team, and Cork will need to match that. And Cork are quite physical when they want to be. It wouldn't be the first thing that they go to. Their go-to would be their hurling, their speed, their use of space. But I do expect it to be quite physical, and I expect Tipperary to just look at over the line, Rory.
What do you think, Owen, in terms of the game, the contest, what we're likely to see, and who's going to win?
Yeah, I think, as Jackie said, maybe less, maybe not as tight as Clare Limerick, so probably higher scoring, but still plenty of hits. I think it's completely set on the fence. I think it's fairly even. I know you were saying you'd have Tip as favourites, maybe very slight favourites for me.
You're going to go for draw?
Yeah, sure.
It's the classic sit on the fence. It is a very significant fixture, though, I suppose, from a Cork perspective. Anyway, for a start, if they lose, it's Ennis. And Ennis and the Gaelic grounds. I don't,
whoever gets through whoever wins should get out of Munster.
Yeah, you'd hope, but like the way things are panning out. I mean, I think Tipperary's next fixture after this is Limerick, isn't it? So
Limerick and Waterford at home last year.
Yeah. So that'll be tricky enough. But
you might need 5 points, would you, lads? You
may do, and scoring averages could come into it and everything. They all seem to be capable of beating each other, with the exception of Waterford at the minute. And who knows, you might get a spark there yet. But we'll shift gears to Leinster, Dublin, Wexford. Two teams maybe not exactly operating 4 sheets to the wind at the peak of their powers, but without any doubt, I would imagine, Jackie, the most important game in both their seasons on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you've set it up lovely there, Rory. I think both are probably, I won't say struggling, but not firing on all cylinders. Dublin are definitely rebuilding because they had a bit of an exodus post Micheál O'Donoghue getting the job. Wexford just seemed to be struggling off the back of a poor league that was littered with injuries and wides. So they're kind of struggling to get up and running, although they had a decent win the last round. So, and maybe it's a good time for both of them to be, we say, stumbling upon each other, because it's such a massive game. And, we always heard in Premiership a real 6-pointer when it came to relegation. This is a real 4-pointer, and they'll have a massive swing. And just looking at their last 3 times they met, it's been really tight. Dublin 1-1, Wexford 1-1. I think there was a draw, and there's always only been a couple of points between them. Excuse me. So it's nicely poised. It really is. How fit is Lee Chin is, probably only Darragh Egan can answer that question. And I just feel Dublin are just starting. I think Dublin are probably in a slightly better place than Wexford. The last day they just seem to be a little slicker and things like that. One surprising thing, I would have liked to have seen a bit more of Owen O'Donnell so far this year. I thought against Antrim he was quite subdued, and the last game he doesn't seem to have the same pep in his step. I don't know if he needs to come to 6.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, do you push him out to the half back line and try and get him into the play?
At that, and maybe looking at a Paddy Smith. Keane O'Callaghan is obviously gone, so he's a bit of a loss, and maybe Micheál is quite worried about that. But look, I feel Paddy Smith could do a really good job in there as well. But I just think him and Donald Burke are too pivotal for Dublin. You need Owen O'Donnell operating at an 8 or 9 out of 10, and at the minute for me, I'd like to see a bit more of him. So that's probably something that's probably Micheál is time with. But Donald Burke, and one thing Wexford they do have able man markers in the Rex, and Simon Donoghue is able to do a decent job. So can one of those shut down Donald Burke? And if they do, that could be key in this game.
A little bit made about the venue and the fact that Dublin chose to move this game to Croke Park on.
Yeah,
I mean, is it significant? Parnell Park is the natural home for Dublin hurling, granted, but I don't know. I think sometimes is there may be too much of a big deal made of this. Would it have any significant effect on the result? And is it advantage Wexford as a result? I'm not so sure.
I think it has to be a slight advantage to Wexford when you have a packed stadium roaring you on. I mean, Croke Park, if there's less than 40,000 in Croke Park, there's no atmosphere. You know, the noise all goes out the hill end. How many would we expect tomorrow? 15, maybe?
20? We'll be doing well now, I'd say. Well, Wexford will probably come up, and Wexford will have big numbers because they have fantastic support. So I would imagine they'll get to 15 anyway, yeah.
But so it's not going to have the same kind of intensity that it would have in Parnell Park, or even you're going to have a lot more, probably even Wexford than Tip, whereas you would have expected more the other way, or sorry, than Dublin, you would have expected the other way around. So it's got to be a bit of a boost for Wexford, I think.
What's the reasoning? What would you say the reasoning was behind moving it there?
It's a hard one to know. Was it anything to do with, you know, wanting to maybe play a different style or something, and thought that the bigger
I'd say it's a pace thing, Rory. I'd say if they're playing in Parnell, and I agree with Owen, you do lose that home support and it becomes a 50-50 in Croke Park. But if you look, Chris Crummey's gone, hugely physical. Liam Rush is gone, hugely physical. Sean Moran, Keane Callan, all big men. And in Parnell Park, physicality is probably an awful lot more prevalent than the wide open spaces of Croke Park. And probably maybe the profile of this Dublin team has changed. And maybe it's something that Micheál has gone for, a more pacier element to this team. So that maybe he's like, you know what, we lose a bit of the home support, but we might gain it in the open surrounds of Croke Park and feed into our game a bit more. I think that's potentially why they might have changed. And if I'm Wexford, I'd rather be going to Croke Park. Those dressing rooms, you can't even fit one team in one of the dressing rooms, and it just has that old dirty feel to it. Parnell Park.
I like it. I've always loved Parnell Park. Now I think it's a real cozy.
It's a great venue.
Yeah.
It's a great venue. Terrible to blame it though.
yeah. How do you see this one panning out on?
Yes, as Jackie said, maybe Dublin looked slightly slicker last week. You'd be worried for Wexford that they felt the need to play Lee Chin with an injury against Antrim. That kind of showed that they felt under pressure. But then again, a lot of people were tipping Antrim to, you know, finally get that big win, and they didn't. So I don't know. I think where Wexford maybe could surprise us.
Okay, could I ask you on that, Jackie? And that was something popped into my head during the week that I'd love to ask you, because I'd imagine it's definitely something that probably came across in your career. Does an intercounty hurler ever go onto the field 100% feeling in the hail of his health? Are you always going out with a niggle of some sort, a bit of a sore elbow or a sore backside or sore something? I mean, are you ever really 100% peak health-wise?
I could safely say I never was, Rory. And the challenge always was to get as close to 100%. There was always, now maybe I was a bit fussy or something like that. There was always something wrong with you, whether it was from not sleeping great last night, maybe not eating as much as you normally would, to maybe hurting your hamstring a couple of weeks ago and you're still not 100, you've passed the fitness test, but you're still not. Maybe something to getting a belt in your hand that week, and when you catch a ball, it stings. So, like, you know, I never felt 100% where everything was spot on. And sometimes it was stuff outside of hurling, you know, work has just got too busy, and are you 100% physical and mentally? Never. Sometimes there was some mental stuff going on maybe in your head, some doubts, poor game the last day, maybe a poor training session in the lead up to it. Sometimes it was a physical thing, you're carrying a knock or things like that. But the challenge always was to get as close to 100% physically and mentally. But no, I can safely say I never felt that I was 100% really perfect in every way. There was times where I was really close, but there was I could never say I was. And then there was times, like I remember playing in 2013 again Tipperary. Oh God, I'd say if I was 65%, I was probably doing myself justice. I was riddled with doubts. I didn't think I'd see half time. I had a torn quad again, awfully in the first round. It wasn't right. I had a big strap on it. I didn't feel right at all, but somehow we just stumbled over the line and got through it. So I'd say that was probably my poorest as regards being prepared.
And sometimes, Jackie, I was talking to a former intercounty footballer not so long ago, and he said he never took the field 100%. He always had pain somewhere. And I'm just wondering, is it slightly more prevalent across the intercounty spectrum that nearly every intercounty player is going onto the field hurt in some, even it might only be a niggle, it might only be something really small. But I don't know if the general public are aware sometimes that these are people that have day jobs and that they're actually going out onto the field a lot of the time.
Yeah. And
not 100% healthy.
I'd say it's more prevalent now because we had 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, sometimes even to an All-Ireland semi-final, 5 or 6 weeks of a window. Now you've 6 days in some situations. If you're very lucky, you might have 2 or 3 weeks. So I can imagine the knocks that they're carrying, the emotional baggage that they're carrying. They're trying to come down of one game, right? We need to get ready for, Tipper coming to town next week. I often thought if I'd be hurling in this current scenario, if I was playing for Kilkenny, I would possibly take every Friday off to the round robin, just to give myself that day, just to kind of chill out and relax, or maybe a Monday, or I'd probably play around it. I'd have to take a day off work. You play Sunday, you play Galway. Say Kilkenny played Galway last Sunday. I might take Monday off just to down tools, relax, get me recovery right, and just mentally just to come down that I don't have to worry about work for that day. That's what I would do. I don't know if any lads do that in the GA world, but I would feel I would need that to mentally just kind of come down off it for the day.
Right. It's I suppose it's again a lot of unintended consequences, given we've kind of put a professional sports calendar on an amateur game, which again, look, it's an old hobby horse, so we won't go down that road. One last word before we go, Jackie, on Kilkenny heading up to Corrigan Park. And there is this notion, a tough place to go and all that. And it is an unusual intercounty ground. But we don't necessarily see any real trouble for Kilkenny here, do we?
I don't foresee it, Rory. I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 30 years since these two teams last met in Championship. I think it was 1993. It was an All-Ireland semi-final. I was there on the hill, sitting on one of those barriers with a very sore backside, with a foghorn in my father's ear. But I think that was the last time, and I think Kilkenny ran out easy winners. Things have probably changed in Antrim since then, and they're an awful lot more competitive. But I'd expect Kilkenny to be a bit more, I'd say Derek is starting to find out things about his team. I think he found out an awful lot about Derek Corcoran last week.
And by the way, Jackie, isn't it fantastic to see Mikey Kerry back?
It's super. It's fantastic. Great. It's great for Mikey. And he offers another dynamic to that team. So I expect Kilkenny to really go after this Antrim team. They'll be a bit kind of disgruntled after dropping that lead that they had last week. And I think that'll focus the minds in for Antrim. And I expect them to maybe win 4 or 5 points at least.
Listen, Jackie, thanks a million. Thanks to Owen. It's been it should be another really good weekend's hurling. I'm really looking forward to Saturday night for obvious reasons, but we'll be keeping an eye on everything. We'll be back again on Monday morning to review it all. Looking forward to what should be hopefully another cracking weekend in Munster and hurling, Munster and Leinster hurling championships. And just want to say thanks to Jackie. And when we come back, it's Ciarán, Whelan, David Tubridy on the provincial football finals.
He hits it, it's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Back with a bit of football now. Delighted to have Ciarán Whelan and David Tubridy from RTÉ Sport and Sunday Game, and then obviously James McMahon from RTÉ Online to kind of preview the provincial football finals weekend on Sunday. 2 massive games, Kerry Clare and Galway Sligo. Looking forward to both of them, but I think it would be remiss to not begin with a quick chat around the draw implications of, and whether or not it will have any bearing on these 2 provincial finals on Sunday coming. In terms of the draw, Wheelo, what did you make of it?
Well, I think, Roy, you definitely have to welcome it, because like for years we've pushed to get to this format, and there's definitely an element of excitement about it. And like I tuned in on Tuesday, I think at 1 o'clock, to see who was coming out of the pot when. So I think it's brilliant that we're finally at a stage where we have a kind of a new championship structure with novel type games, home and away, and loads to look forward to. So
don't mention the word. You say home and away. Don't mention the word.
Don't mention the word. But then when you look at the context of it, and you're kind of going, you get a sense now that everyone just wants the provincial finals out of the way, so we can get on with it. You know, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but that's kind of the feeling you get. And it's very hard also to talk about the games when the provincial finals are still outstanding, because, you know, obviously there's strong favourites going into the Leinster final, and everyone is assuming this and assuming that. That mightn't necessarily be the way it unfolds. So while the draw is brilliant and there's definitely potential for massive games, you know, we're still at that stage where you're trying to evaluate who might be in with who. And I still don't like, to be very honest, I still don't like the fact that, you know, we've a load of games to eliminate four teams, and you're basically playing. Teams are playing to top the group to get a week off, to get seconds to get home advantage. Do you know what I mean? And third go through, and you could possibly draw a game and still get out of your group. And I fear that that's going to take a little bit of the excitement out of the group system. That 12 teams are qualifying from 16, so it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. But in the context of the groups, you know, Group 2 looks, you know, you do have to strongly fancy Galway to come through, and then Armagh, Derry, Tyrrell, like unbelievable games. If Kerry get over Clare, you know, talking Mayo in the first game, you know, they whet the appetite. If Louth beat Dublin go into that group and it becomes a group of death. You know, so there's loads of permutations that can happen over the next couple of weeks. But like loads to look forward, but just a little bit skeptical that a lot of games just to eliminate 4 teams.
And we'll get into the provincial finals in a second, David, in relation to Kerry, Clare particularly, but the Clare they're up against it. Let's be honest. You're playing the All-Ireland champions, and it will be a tough task for them, but I'm sure they'll rise to that challenge, and we'll talk about that in a second. The reality is the losers are heading into a team with 3 Ulster teams in that particular group. Does that have any significance, or will that weigh on Colm Collins' conscience heading into this game, given the fact that like that's a really tough draw now, depending on who ends up losing this game on Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very tough. Just say if Kerry get over the weekend, Clare drop into that group of 3. I think the Ulster teams will probably be sick of playing each other. They're always coming up tough against each other the whole time, and there's no bit of leeway. It's Monaghan, Donegal would have rather to meet a Leinster, Connacht or Munster team to just get out of the Ulster Championship, where they seem to be meeting each other all the time. But it is a tough one for Clare. We have played Donegal before, but it was only in league a few years ago. We could have them in Cusack Park, which would be a massive advantage for Colm Collins, which would be huge for Clare, because they are very strong in Cusack Park, and you never know the way Donegal are going at the moment. They're losing it down. There'll be a team that would be down in the dumps, but at the moment, Colm will be looking at that draw and saying it's probably the toughest out of all of them for Clare.
The logistics involved in running a competition at this stage of the season, and I think maybe that probably feeds into a degree in relation to why they had to have the draw now, James, because it's quite tricky for teams to organise themselves. From what I hear, Mayo can't get a hotel in Kerry anywhere for that game, and have to stay in Limerick, which will give you an indication, and that might be mirrored somewhat up and down. So it's a huge undertaking. It's still in very much guinea pig mode. And what do you expect from it?
Yeah, I mean, it is very much a guinea pig mode. I think some of the venues for the games are going to be decided today. I'm just wondering as well, Rory, like, was it possible, you know, to have your provincial finals on Sunday week, and then to have a draw the following Monday for games to take place on the following Saturday and Sunday? So that probably was a tight turnaround for those games. This all sounds, I mean, I'm looking forward to some of the games. I mean, Ciarán has pointed out some of the good games that are coming up in the next few weeks, but this is something that it's a bit like the qualifiers, the backdoor system back in 2001 in the first year. It was good, but there were a couple of tweaks made in the couple of years afterwards. So, like, say, for example, some teams were playing 6 days after they played in the provinces, so that was changed. So this is very much something that like this is the new way, but I expect tweaks to this in 24, 25 and 26 going forward. So yeah, like I mean, I do think the logistics, as well as that for fans as well. Like I mean, for the likes of Clare there and David, like I mean, if Clare you have to play Donegal and Monaghan, I'm not sure which game is at home, but even like the travel involved, I mean, the cost of hotels. I mean, I think I heard one Donegal played Mayo fans travelling up to Donegal in the league there, and they stayed in Sligo overnight en route. There was something like a hotel room being close to €1,000. So like, I mean, that's what you're up against as well. But to answer your question, well, yeah, look, I mean, I think there's going to be logistical issues, all right. But again, you know, go back to Ciarán, like, I mean, 12 teams to go through when you're playing, 24 games. So I think it's good what they're doing. It's what people want. It's what teams want, more games. But I think it's going to require a bit of fine tuning on it over the next couple of years.
One team that won't need accommodation or need to figure anything out in relation to one team that won't need any accommodation and no travel expenses and nice low budgets so that they can spend all their big fancy budget on their team is the Dubs. And it's raised its head. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with what Glenn Ryan said. And I think a lot of people might feel, yeah, like he speaks the truth. You played in an era, Wheelo, actually. You straddled kind of both eras. You played, I mean, I think you played in championship matches down in Longford, and you might have played in championship matches down the country when the Dubs were on the road, this in the pre sort of, you know, permanent residency that is Croke Park now. And obviously then you played lots of matches in Croke Park as well. So you're probably best positioned to assess it in terms of the perceived advantages that Dublin have, but are they any different to what they've always had?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point. And we're on Sunday night and only saw a small bit of Glenn Ryan's interview. I didn't see the full piece really until kind of Monday, where there was a lot more broader type comments around some of the advantages and stuff like that. And I certainly like to be, let's be fair about it. Of course, there's an advantage of Dublin playing in Croke Park. That doesn't take a rocket science to work that one out. What the home advantage is called home advantage for a reason, you know, across all sports. So if Dublin are playing there 8-9 times a year, of course it's an advantage within the white lines of the pitch, because, you know, Croke Park to me over the years, and I probably played, I'd say large majority, Rory, I was only 6 or 7 games, maybe slightly more, but I'd say 80% of the games I played was in Croke Park. And Croke Park, I've said this before, is an intimidating stadium. It can either make you feel 2 inches taller or 2 inches smaller, depending on kind of how you're going at that time. And we had a lot of good days, and we kind of a lot of bad days. And it's a difficult place to go if you're not used to that environment. So absolutely, I don't think anyone can disagree that by playing there regularly and winning there regularly, you have a bit of an advantage. However, on the other side, the little things, you know, I know Glenn Ryan was emotionally charged last week, and if you're a manager and you've lost to Dublin in big games, you look for every little reason as to why you might have lost those games. But I played there for the best part of 14 years, and we were always in the same dressing room. You knew the guys on the door. You always, you know, those comforts that come with a home advantage were always there. But it didn't make us put the ball over the bar. It didn't help us when we got on the pitch. You know what I mean? There's enough people in back rooms now of inter-county teams to deal with that sort of noise and that sort of psychological part. So I would say within the white lines, absolutely, if you're playing there regularly, you do have an advantage. And it's not Dublin's fault. Dublin are always willing to travel. The Leinster Council place the fixtures there. They're happy to go on the road. So I don't think it can be blamed on Dublin. But within the white lines, if you're playing there regularly, you do have an advantage. But some of the little needless stuff, I don't think that comes into the equation at all. I think that's just noise that has to be dealt with. And I can't see anything in that, because it certainly didn't benefit us for 10-14 years. There was nothing that we were pointing to that was giving us that extra edge off the field. You know, that's the way it's always been, you know what I mean? So I think there's a little bit of balance needed, that yes, there's an acknowledgement there that it does benefit Dublin in terms of home advantage, but it's gone a little bit far.
You then ask teams as well, David. I mean, there's an inconsistency of approach here in terms of the narrative, in that some teams and some managers will say that's exactly where we want to play them. And the best place to beat Dublin is in Croke Park, and rise to that challenge. I mean, I'm sure if you were to ask Mickey Hart this morning, okay, we're going to take the Leinster final down to Portlaoise, so there's a good atmosphere, he'll say, good luck to you. We're heading for Croker. So, look, I don't know.
Rory, just coming back on that, you mentioned Mickey Hart. I remember league games when we were due to play Tyrrell away in league games, and Mickey Hart, I think he was willing to give up home advantage to get the game in Croke Park, because he wanted to get that familiarity, because his team were going to contend there. Do you know what I mean? He wanted to get that extra game in Croke Park. He was definitely one of the managers that was always, and again, every manager is different, and every team is different, and every team is operating at a different level. So it's probably different for some of the teams that wouldn't be that familiar with it. So apologies.
No. It's just bad. It's great stuff. But that's the thing, though, David, is not everybody would be of the same view on this, and a lot of people might feel quite happy to go in and play Dublin there.
Yeah, I suppose I was talking to a few of our friends after the draw was made the last day, and we were just going on about Dublin. They'll probably get to play, if they get to our Ireland final this year, they'll probably get to play in Croke Park 11 times, and then Kerry, they'll play in if they get to the Ireland final, is it 3 times they'll probably play. But like they say, Kerry, it's like a home pitch for Kerry as well when they travel up. They want to, as you said, they want to play Dublin in Dublin, and it's a big wide open pitch. And once you get over the line, it's 15 on 15. Like it's you don't think about, I know Clint was talking about everything outside the pitch, but once you get over that line on the day, you forget about everything. It's I've only played there a handful of times now in Croke Park, but every player in the country would love to play in Croke Park. It's just an unbelievable feeling. There's differences there from, I suppose, from my National League games when there was only a few thousand, or the National League finals when there was only a few thousand, to last year there, when I think there was about 20,000 people for the Derry game there last year. The atmosphere is unbelievable. And as any player, you always want to play there, and to beat Clare were unlucky this year. We nearly pipped Dublin in Croke Park. And it's just some pitch, like, so everybody would love to get Dublin in Croke Park to beat them, but yeah.
Well, 2 games that won't be played in Croke Park this weekend, and on the way, obviously we're heading for Galway, McHale Park for Galway Sligo, and we will start there, James, first, and as a proud Sligo man, and they're on the bit of a crest of a wave, obviously with lots of underage success and a first Connacht final appearance in 8 years.
8 years, yeah.
And not being given too much of a chance. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect Sligo to be lifting the cup at whatever time, 3:30 on Sunday. But I would hope that, obviously, that they would give a good account of themselves. And listening to Tony McEntee after the win over New York, he was somewhat bullish. The comments he was making about, we're a team that are developing. We think we have some traits that would befit a team in the top tier. I think Sligo have got decent forwards. Mm-hmm. I think they've got a couple of sturdy backs. And they've won 9 games on the trot, Rory, and they've got the under-20 success as well. So there's a real feel-good factor in the county. But this is a big test. I mean, this is a step up. This is a team who are probably Galway second, third favourite for the All-Ireland. So what Sligo would be hoping for, I'm not sure whether they can go out and be swashbuckling. I hope they will be competitive in the game for as long as possible. And I hope they will leave with their heads relatively high after that game, because they've still got 3 more games in the round robin thereafter. They've got Kildare in Markievicz Park if they lose, coming up on the 21st of May, and I think they'll have a big welcome Kildare in Markievicz Park, and they'll be very hospitable, and there'll be no carry on the sideline. So I'm hoping Sligo, that Sligo will give a good account of themselves. whether they can, how they'll do against this vaunted Galway forward line. I mean, there's 4 or 5 players there that are just top class. Cormac had a brilliant game the last day. Even at the back, you know, even in defence, Galway are sturdy. They have a couple of new names to the team this year. I thought they were good against Roscommon. I can't say they were very good against Roscommon, but I thought they controlled that game for long stages. So it's a game I'm looking forward to. It's a bigger pitch than Markovic, and it's a pitch that I think will suit Sligo. So hopefully they'll give a good account of themselves.
Early throw in 2 o'clock, McHale Park. Looking forward to it as well, Whelan. It's the live game on RTÉ. They're playing an All-Ireland semi-final on the Saturday against Kerry with their under-20s, and they're playing a Connacht final against Galway on the Sunday. I mean, this is exactly where Sligo football would want to be, is it not?
Absolutely, and like I think Sligo, they're really in bonus territory, if we be honest, you know. And even when you look what's coming further down the line, like obviously they got a great run in Division 4. Okay, you maybe have to put in context the 2 teams they've beaten so far in terms of, you know, New York and London, and so you can't get too carried away with that level of performance. But it's got them into a Connacht final. And I think if you look further down the line, if Dublin were to beat Louth and Sligo were to put in a decent performance but lose, the fair chance they'll have Dublin in a neutral venue, you know, in a few weeks' time, and they're going to get three extra games in the championship. And in terms of the development and the pathway that McEntee has these on, that is worth its weight in gold to them. So like they're still like, okay, he's in 3rd year of his project, but they're very, very well conditioned. You know, they have a lot of quality up forward, and the likes of Sean Carabine, Pat Spillane gone really well, Niall Murphy and Patrick O'Connor inside. I've been impressed with Keane Lally as well, and the Park, I think he's been very impressive. You would expect Luke Cowie and Brian Cox to sit in deep in front to try and protect the full back line. I think Tony McEntee there will be an aspect of trying to stay competitive and keep them in this game at Galway. But ultimately, like Galway for me are just operating just at a different level, have been all year. Joyce has them in a really good place. We know they're probably the best defence in the country. To me, they're the best team in control of possession. They don't give away many turnovers. They're excellent at that. They were very good against Roscommon the last day in terms of controlling the game. So I think it's a step too far for Sligo, and I think it's about a performance. It's trying a reasonable performance that will give them something going into that group stage. But they, like, to me, they're in bonus territory there, and it's brilliant for Sligo football, as you say. Look at the 20s tomorrow coming in against Kerry, and that game is not a done deal.
Oh, that's a 50-50.
That's a kind of a 50-50 deal.
Yeah, because
so they're in a really good place. But I think, like, let's be honest, Sunday's going to be a step too far, I think, in terms of the scene.
But even Rory, that under-20 team side, I think it's a much better team that won Connacht last year. You know, I thought there was a bit of a smash and grab in the way they beat Mayo, but I was really impressed with the way they beat Galway this year in the Connacht final. So if it was Galway playing tomorrow against Kerry, it would probably be a 50-50 game in the eyes of most people. Also as well, Ciarán, I think if Sligo were to beat Kildare in their opening round robin game, I mean, they'd still be in the race going to play Dublin at that neutral venue. So I suppose that's one of the good things about this new format. At least a team is still in it to the last game if they win their first game.
Everyone in with a shout to make to the last 12. And James is talking, and I'm not going to characterize it as defeatist language and assuming that Sligo lose. And Whelan mentioned, David, that Galway are operating at a different level. No, Galway are operating at a different level to nearly everybody. But is this a bit of a, as provincial finals go, a bit of a lose-lose for Joyce, in that the classic lose-lose? You win the game easily, sure, you were expected to. You win a tight one, you probably get criticism for not putting a big enough score on them. And then you might also run the risk of picking up a couple of injuries to a couple of key players with the round robin coming down the tracks. So is it a tricky one for Joyce to sort of manage all of that?
It is, yeah. It's a tough one. I suppose they won't be playing until 2 weeks after that again. It's going to be, I suppose, it'll probably be a physical game. Sligo will want to get stuck into them early on. And the way Galway are playing at the moment, they're They are. At the start of the year, I always thought Mayo was the team to do. But watching Galway over the last couple of weeks, their strength in numbers, their size across the pitch is ridiculous. And Tierney, Peter Cook, you've John Maher, you've Conroy, you've got 4 or 5 big physical players across the pitch, which will stand to them. Johnny Heaney as well. Then you have the strength inside the full forward line with Comer and Walsh and Ian Burke. But it's tough. It's tough for Galway. Just going back to the years when we were with Clare, we got promoted first game, and then we won our first game in the Munster Championship. Then we drew Kerry in the first game, and I suppose it was along the same lines. You want to give a good account to yourself. You want to keep the score down as much as you can and give Kerry a game of it. But it is a massive lift for Sligo to get 3 extra games in the championship after this. I just see a lot of teams talking about Chalton Cup, and would Sligo not be better off, or Clare would have to be better off in the Chalton Cup? Would they get better games? It's not. It's, you want to be playing the top teams, and you learn from the top teams. Like down through the years, we've always learned off Kerry, Cork, the style of football. And as you move up the divisions, you learn about defensive structures and forward structures, and it will stand. And McEntee will bring this Sligo team along. And it's a tough one at the weekend. But I think the Galway players will give it a good go, and you never know. Like, they'd be thinking, like, if we get to 50 minutes and there is a scoreline up there, they might be able to ease off a few players. But it's a tough one for Choice.
As in, what's I mean, obviously back-to-back Connacht championships. I don't think Galway have done that for quite a while, but if he was sitting down on a Monday morning and he was going, look, these were all the good aspects of winning yesterday, what would he be looking for?
I think he's looking for a bigger contribution, probably from maybe his forward line. I think they're very solid at the back. We know that. We know they'd be very structured. They'd be very organised. But if you look at Galway's performances, even going back to the Derry game last year, Comer carried them. Shane Walsh came to the fore in the final. Comer, kind of the last day, kind of really dragged them through against Roscommon. And he's probably looking for Matthew Tierney was brilliant during the league, but it's gone a little bit quiet in the championship. The likes of Rob Finnerty, Tom O'Callaghan, he's probably looking for a little bit more from his forward line in terms of pitching in and getting scores. That would be where, standing back and looking, I think, like, you'd expect Galway to pull up a reasonably big score. And I think it's just trying to build that confidence of those players in that forward line, that they're getting a little bit more from everybody collectively up front. Because from 1 to 9, we know they're going to be solid. And Maher has been a revelation in the middle of the park, and then Cook kind of drops into that space as well. So yeah, I think up front, and particularly, we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, Rory, even maybe the Shane Walsh role, that getting him at that edge of the D, getting him in those positions to actually take guys on in the right position of the field rather than out on the sidelines and stuff like that. And maybe just working on that structure in our forward line. I think that's what he'd be looking to get out again.
Looking ahead then, obviously the bigger game on Sunday, from your point of view, certainly, David, is Kerry Clare, and a first Munster final under Colm Collins, and the first Munster final for Clare since 2012, is it? Are we going back to 11 years?
Correct.
Yeah. So
back to Cork.
Back to Cork in 2012. You were probably playing that day, I would imagine. It was in the Gaelic. That was the Gaelic grounds as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
One and only.
I think, look, the venue, there was a little bit made about the venue. I don't necessarily think the venue is that big a deal, really. And both counties would be quite familiar with it. And I think, look, there should be a reasonably good crowd. But what's the mood like, do you sense now down in like Quilty and Milltown Malbane are all around your direction? Big football heartland of Clare that it is, and the big jewel county in Munster, according to Ciarán Shannon, now the number 1 jewel county in the province. What's the mood like ahead of Sunday, and the challenge now that obviously the Clare team are going to face taking on the All-Ireland champions in a Munster final?
Well, at the moment, I'm like a plague. Nobody will talk to me. I can't get any inside info or anything like that at the moment. But there's a great buzz. Just seeing here in the village in Doonbeg, we've flags out on all the poles and there's flags everywhere. It's everybody's talking about it, and hopefully now we can get everybody all over the county to come out and support the footballers on Sunday, because they deserve it. And the way Colin Collins has done his job over the last 10 years now has been phenomenal. And we just hope that everybody can get out on Sunday. It's going to be a really tough game. You're playing the All-Ireland champions, but I think the two games against Cork and Limerick will stand to Clare. I don't think Kerry got much out of Tipperary and Clarny, but it's the two games will stand to them. Two close games, two hard-fought games. They did pick up a few injuries the last day. I know Dara Bohannon, he's not even down to start, or he's not even on the panel the next day. He's going to be a massive loss for Clare. And then you have a few injuries, last-minute injuries that they picked up against Limerick the last day, which is going to be tough, because it's the bench is getting a bit thinner as it goes along. We know what Kerry are going to bring. They're going to put everything into Jack O'Connor. He's named the strongest panel he's probably have. Oh, yeah. So he's not taking it lightly, and he wants to get a good performance out of Kerry going into the qualifying stages of the championship as well. And he wants to get good games into him and match practice for him as well. So it's going to be a tough one. Hopefully Clare can keep it tight for the first 10-15 minutes, and just try and get control of the ball, just mind the ball. And possessions have been a downfall for Clare at the moment. Turnovers in Limerick and the Cork game have been terrible. They have to cut that back to big time, especially playing against Kerry. And they're shooting as well. They're shooting the wides they've kicked over the last two games. I think they've 15 kicked against Cork, or the 15-16, and then they've another 12-13 against Limerick the last day. So they'll have to sharpen up on that. If they don't, the game could get away from them. And Kerry, they won't ease up. They'll put the foot down, and they'll try and finish you off as quick as they can.
Kerry have been slightly hidden away, Whelan, in that they had a patchy enough league campaign. They lost all their away games. Did really seem too nonplussed about it. And they're obviously heading into a Munster final now where, people are kind of, where are Kerry?
It's interesting. You could have said the exact same comments there about Dublin, patchy league, exact same, very, very similar. And I think that might be something the player can take going into this game, that they have a couple of games under their belt, a couple of tough, really competitive games. Kerry were, like, the Tipperary game was of no benefit to them, similar to Dublin and Laois. And I'd say Clare will be hoping that Kerry are just maybe a little bit off it, or coming into the game, or even a little bit complacent or whatever. And because Clare are operating at a different level to Tipperary, and they have that solid defensive structure, and they have quality forwards. I know David's gone, but you've still have Emmett McMahon, Keelan Sexton, Owen Cleary, like up front, guys that can get scores and won't be afraid to go at the Kerry defence. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. You're right, Kerry, we're still waiting for last year's Kerry to turn up, really, but they haven't really been asked any question yet. They're back at full strength, so it's for me, it's about Clare getting a bit of early energy and a bit of confidence, and being able to develop a bit of self-belief in that first 20 minutes that they can compete with Kerry. If you were to be critical of Clare, maybe sometimes they tend to raise their game for the stronger teams, but can still drop down a level in the weaker teams. Like Limerick had a goal chance that could have nearly beaten them. And when they were playing against other weaker teams like Cork,
I was waiting for it.
But no, like obviously against Cork, that was, as I said, they raised their game, because that was a big game. Against Dublin, they raised their game. So you'd be hoping that Clare get an extra 15-20% out of themselves, because they're going to need it and get some energy from that 20-25 minutes. But it's still going to be a very, very difficult task in terms of the quality that Kerry will have. And if Kerry, you know, if Kerry get a run on them at all, you know, Kerry, how devastating it can be. So it is a tough task for Clare. But again, similar to Sligo, you know, I think Clare are obviously in a better position. They've operated at a higher level. So I think Clare will get closer. I think this will be maybe 5-6 point game.
Yeah, and it will give Jack O'Connor certainly the best test that he could have asked for in Munster, given the parlous state of Cork and their recent trajectory, which, you know, look, that's another day's story. But I think from a Kerry perspective, James, one of the things that I'm fascinated by is Jack O'Connor. I think he's quietly underappreciated to a certain extent in how brilliant a manager he actually is. I mean, people don't realize he's going for his 5th All-Ireland across 3 different management stints.
Yeah.
The only box that he didn't really tick as a manager was put back-to-backs, and he had his opportunities, obviously, in 2005, and he had another chance, I think, in 2010 when they went out and at quarterfinal stage.
That's right, down. Yeah.
But, like, he's in a rarefied group. To win 4 All-Irelands as a manager, you're right up there with some of the most successful managers of all time, the most successful managers of all time. And I often wonder, is he even really appreciated within Kerry? I find him a fascinating character, and he's at a much more mature stage of his career. And I'm just wondering, in terms of him being the wily old fox that he is, has he kind of mapped Kerry's pathway to this year's All-Ireland slightly different, knowing the proliferation of games that they're going to have to navigate to get back to All-Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, look, I mean, you could say that this year's championship, it's a bit like the Entry Grand National, and we've probably just now crossed the Melling Road, but we still have Beechers and the Canal Turn and all that to take. And like Kerry didn't do a whole pile during the league. You know, they as you said, they kind of slipped through it quietly. I mean, you know, with no disrespect to Clare, I even though I think Clare will obviously give Kerry a tougher ask than Tip did. I mean, Kerry v Mayo in 2 weeks' time, I mean, that's going to be their first test. I mean, Kerry, like other teams, like Dublin, like Galway, like possibly Mayo, like possibly Tyrrell, are looking really at the 2nd of July, that weekend where we have the All-Ireland quarterfinals. That's where you probably hit the you hit the elbow in the Grand National, and the finishing line of the All-Ireland final itself is just about, you know, a bit ahead of you and all that. But yeah, I mean, going back to O'Connor, I mean, even when he took the job in the fact that he didn't play for Kerry, I don't know, was there some resentment down in the kingdom that Jack wasn't one of us, that he didn't play and all that. But look, when Jack comes into a job like he did when he came in 2004, and then when he came back again, he won the All-Ireland, he won the league. Last year he came back, he won the All-Ireland and he won the league. And I suppose it would be the final box for him to tick if he could do this back to back. You know, All-Ireland, which he hasn't done. And of course it was Tyrone who scuppered them in 2005, and then Down of all teams who scuppered them in 10. Yeah, I mean, I would put him up there definitely with the likes of Sean Boylan, with the likes of Hart, with the likes of Heffernan going back in the day. I mean, he's a top. I think he's mellowed a bit as well as a person, which you know can help as well. I can give you a better perspective on things, but definitely, yeah. I mean, he's up there in one of the top 3 or 4 managers in the association.
What do you think, Whelan? Just in terms of his stature in the game now at this stage, would you think that there is maybe a final realization? This is one of the greatest managers we've ever seen. He's up there with all those names that James has mentioned.
Yeah, he's a serial winner, I think, you know, and, you know, even you go back to his early success, and, you know, even 2009 was probably one of his better All-Irelands, you know, that
a painful one.
A painful one. Kerry weren't going well. They were struggling. They had discipline issues, you know, probably wasn't getting on with senior players. You know, that was probably the challenging one, and was able to, you know, turn that round and deliver an All-Ireland. And when he came back last year, you could see he came back with intent from that first McGrath Cup game. He was developing a winning culture and a winning habit, and naturally there's always a little bit of a hangover after an All-Ireland, and that's probably the biggest concern probably in the kingdom, in that Kerry went through a lot of hurt, probably more at the expense of Dublin over the last 6, 7, 8 years, and apart from Eamon Fitzmaurice's year, hadn't had much success, and they got over the line last year, and naturally there's a bit of a hangover there, and probably a small bit of vulnerability there that other teams will look to prey on. So, and that's the bit we don't know. We don't know, are Kerry back and fine-tuned where they were last year? We don't know that yet, because no one has really asked them that question. But the original question, absolutely, Jack O'Connor is a serial winner, and nobody can deny that. To be able to come back and do it a few times, in different generations, and bring new teams to the well again, that's not luck. That's there's more to that than that's not winning Lucky All Irelands. That's a seriously talented manager.
Oh, we know about losing those types of finals as well to Jack O'Connor. And listen, lads, thanks very much. A brilliant weekend to look forward to. Should be 2 really good games on their own merits. I'm not going to ask people for predictions, because I think, in fairness, I'm sure you're hoping for a result more so than predicting one, David. So we won't put you on the spot. Look, it is the 2 teams that were in last year's All-Ireland finals coming up against 2 teams that, it'll be a challenge. But let's hope for 2 competitive games. Just want to thank everybody. Those 2 matches, by the way, are live on RTÉ2. 1:30 coverage begins, or maybe 1:15 RTÉ2. 2:00 is Galway, Sligo, and 4:00.
4:45, Rory.
1:45.
Is it? Okay, very good.
1:45.
Of course, with extra time.
Extra time.
They've built that in just in case. And then 4:00, Kerry, Mayo, and they're both live on RT2 on Sunday. The Sunday game is live, obviously, on Sunday night, 9:30. And they'll review the best of the weekend's action. Thanks to Ciarán, thanks to David, thanks to James, thanks to Jackie and Owen for earlier. We'll be back next Monday morning with a review of the weekend. And until then, thanks very much for listening, and Slán agus Bannocht.
How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it.